Okay, so the question here is problem with background picture, and there's a helpful video to explain the problem that is being experienced. There's a few teachable moments here to go into, largely about debugging techniques. So we've got the code set up locally, and we're going to go through the steps to experience the same issue, and then some strategies and skills to debug what's going on. So the problem being experienced is the background picture is not showing, even though the picture is in the right folder, etc. The first skill is to right click and inspect and see if there's any network activity. So you're looking to see if the request is going out. So I'm going to refresh now, and you can see first of all we've got this 404. So 404 means not found. So there's a request happening, but it's not finding the styles. So that's the first clue. So to open up DevTools, we do right click and then inspect, and we can see styles.css. So that encourages us to then, let's look at the source code. And we can see, great, okay, so we've got this URL to style.css. If I click the view source, yeah, sure enough, we get the not found. Another thing that's not happening here, perhaps, is coming up with a good search phrase to Google. So what we're dealing with here is static files, and we're using Flask. So a good search phrase might be flask static files. And if there's official documentation, read the official documentation first. So generally ignore, there's a skill around this, so to ignore the Stack Overflow to begin with, always start with the official documentation. Read the documentation, take a lot of time. I'm not going to take a lot of time to read this now because I've read it already, but if you've never read it before, definitely read it. There's a good explanation here about Flask and static, but there's also a really helpful example here where it says URL for and static, and the documentation explains what these things mean. I'm going to apply that code to the code that we've got here from the example in the video. So the style.css is inside the home.html. So I'm going to jump over to that, which is in the templates directory. And we've got style.css, so it's almost there, it's really close. But what's missing is that URL for. So we're going to add that in. So I'll quickly add that in with a URL for and static, and the file name is equal to style, and it's a coincidence that the file name is the same. And then we're going to close that bracket and close those curly braces as well. Okay, because we've changed this, we're going to have to make sure that Flask has restarted as well. So we're going to go back to the application and start running the application. Notice that we're in debug mode. If you're not in debug mode, Flask debug equals 1, and then you will get automatic refreshing of the Python code. Okay, so now let's go back to the application, and I'm going to clear the requests, and what we're looking for is, do we still get the red or not? So I'm refreshing. Oh, I got an error. Fantastic. Let's look at the error and find out. Could not build URL for endpoint static. Ah, that doesn't say the word static. Did I make a typo? Yes. Static, T-A, static. There we go. Again, I'm going to check that I've restarted. Going to refresh. There we go. We've just got the letter A. That's very confusing for me right now. Let's close the request. And I'm just going to go to the Python code now. So why are we just getting A in the response? What have I done? Let's open up app.py. and we're rendering the home page. Let's check the request. Oh, I've stopped the application. I'm going to start it again. Flask run. Let's see. So we go into the app.py, render a template. Let's do a quick test because I'm in a state of confusion now. So let's go back to something. Let's simplify the problem. So let's just say return here. So what that's doing is it's removing the complexity of trying to render a template just to get back to a point of we know where we are. I'm going to look here, make sure that we've restarted. We have. Here. Okay, great. Just by doing that alone, that strategy, that skill set of being able to say, okay, now I know that the problem might be closer to here inside the render template function. It's a strategy for debugging. So now I've removed that, and we're going to restart the application as well. So it's restarted. Get back to the error. Okay, so we know how to reproduce the error. Great. Now let's go to the render template. So it's maybe the error is somewhere inside this home HTML. Let's have a look. Into the templates, inside the home. Let's see. Perhaps I didn't terminate something correctly. Here we go. Oh, there's the letter A. Let's take that out. Perhaps you saw it on the video ages ago. There we go. So now that letter A is gone. What we're not seeing though is the form. Why is that? It's hidden down here at the bottom. Okay, but what we have fixed is notice how we've no longer got the 404 here. We've now got the 200. 200 means okay, and that's a success. And again, if we right click and view source, we can see, great, we've got static style.css and it's loading the CSS. Fantastic. So we've solved that problem. But hang on a moment, we've got another problem, which is the 404 now of the Omega PNG. And where does that come from? Again, if we view source, style.css, here we go. So we've got this URL. So go up a directory and then into back Omega. That path is not correct. The path needs to be, let's look at our folder structure. So our folder structure, for the static folder, if we just go into static and we do tree, we've got, it's inside back and then Omega. So it's inside the static folder, back and then Omega. So it needs to be static back omega.png. So that's how we load the image. But unfortunately, what our CSS is saying is the wrong network request. And we can see that happening if we hover over here with our cursor. We can see that it's trying to go to back Omega. It's missing the word static. So let's edit the CSS. And so what's important here is not the code. The code is not important. What's important is the strategy and the tools like DevTools. So knowing about DevTools, looking at the network requests, reading the documentation will save you hours or days, weeks of debugging. So we know now that the URL needs to be static /. And again, we need to make sure that the application's reloaded, which it has. Now if I refresh, what we're looking for is to turn this red into black so that we get a 200. So I'm going to clear the requests, press on refresh. Fantastic. Now we've got the picture there. So we've solved quite a few things already. We've read the documentation to learn how to do static URLs. We've got the image appearing. and we've got the form below. Now I know that the video requests to put this picture in the background. That requires CSS, but before then it requires reading about CSS. That's not my strong point, but let's have a go anyway. So let's use the same strategy. First we do some research. So I happen to know that CSS Tricks is a good website for this. So CSS background image. And I'm going to ignore those results. And maybe I will use Mozilla actually. Here we go. So this is a good example of a background image. And let's copy that. It's a little bit hard to read. I would also encourage reading this as well, taking your time. And then let's look at our CSS. So we've got background image, and there's a load of rules here about how it covers and doesn't repeat, and things like that. I'm going to look at the HTML as well, because I don't really know what the structure of this HTML is. So we've got style sheet, we've got the background, yeah, that looks absolutely fine. And what are we going to do? That's just the, yeah, we need to control the placement of the placement. I don't find this very readable, so I'm going to read this one instead. Here we go. Gradients, multiple, no repeat, bottom, center, no repeat. I think what we need from memory is the word cover. I'm going to experiment a little bit with this, so let's see. So again, I'm using network DevTools. Sorry, DevTools, not network. I'm going to hover over. Oh, I see. So the picture is inside a div. So the background of the picture is inside the div, and our content is outside of that div. So as always, the computer is doing what we've asked it to do. So what we need to do is bring our form inside the div to begin with. So let's do that. So because the div starts here and the div ends there, so this is inside the background. If I refresh, you can see, sure enough, it's inside. So what we need to do is bring our form inside. Well, it's not a form yet actually, but that will be an instruction for the learner, for the reader. So now we've got the form with the background image, and this image is from Wikipedia. It's not the original image, because we know what the license of this image is. Okay, so I hope that is helpful with the debug strategies and how to tackle this. So again, the important thing is not the code. The important thing are the strategies. So good search, finding the official documentation, reading the official documentation, but also making use of DevTools, which is extremely helpful to see the 404s and the errors. Another good place to look is in the console log to see any red for errors there. And yeah, okay, best wishes.